global real estate renaissance, reshaping the future of real estate through sustainability, technology, and diversity, with the goal of making housing accessible to the majority of humanity. Every profession that addresses fundamental human needs must reach beyond profit. In healthcare, for example, no one will applaud a doctor who says, "I only do this for money." Why? Because he deals with fundamental human problems, life and death. The service of a doctor carries moral weight, and so it must be with real estate as well, especially because it is about shelter, a basic human necessity. The opportunity to be a professional in the providing of homes cannot be just business. It simply cannot just be business, because it carries an important social and civic responsibility, providing shelter for all. So today, I don't really have any bright ideas to give you as practitioners of real estate to maximize your profits or to make more money. You're already so wealthy anyway. What advice can a retired public servant give you? So my aim is to challenge you to think about the majority, the millions, especially in the global south, particularly Africa, who are still without decent homes to live and to provide for their families. So take Nigeria, for example. We're growing by 6 million people every year. That's like adding Liberia to our country annually. That is 6 million more who need shelter, stability, and dignity. And yet, in many countries of the global south, like us, the dream of home ownership is out of reach. Every human and the families that they make deserve a home, a decent, healthy place for self and family. But that simple expectation of life is complicated first by availability of homes, which itself is a function of affordability. Africa is urbanizing very rapidly. By 2050, more than 60% of our population will actually live in cities. Yet we already face a housing deficit of over 50 million units. So the need is urgent, but the challenges, of course, are immense. Aside from affordability, we have the effect of the twin crises of climate and conflict, and both have continuously destroyed existing housing stock and hindered the building of other houses and homes to replenish the stock that is being depleted. Climate change, for example, is not just rising temperatures, it is rising devastation. And let me give a few examples. In 2020, floods in the Sahel region alone, affected 2.7 million people and destroyed 170,000 homes. That same year, 37,000 homes were destroyed in Kenya due to the flooding near Lake Turkana. The Congo River floods also submerged 100 villages, affecting over 170,000 people. In Nigeria in 2022, floods wiped out almost 200,000 homes, displacing more than 1.4 million people. Cyclone Freddy in Malawi in 2023 destroyed 20,000 homes in just one district. And in just 1 year, 2023, over 1 million homes were destroyed across Africa due to extreme weather alone. And in 2024, floods displaced 500,000 people and destroyed over 300,000 homes across West Africa and Central Africa. The informal settlements where so many low-income Africans live are 50% more likely to suffer damage. And as climate change accelerates, this threat will only grow. So if we don't build for resilience, If we don't build more, we simply will keep rebuilding over and over again. Conflict is the second great challenge all over the world, of course. Conflict is destroying homes. In Ukraine, for example, over 2 million housing units have been destroyed by some of the latest accounts since 2022. In Gaza, nearly 63% of homes are gone. In Sudan, in Lebanon, in Myanmar, millions have been displaced by war. Their homes have been turned to rubble. From Tigray in Ethiopia to Cabo Delgado in Mozambique, North Kivu in the DRC, and Borno State in northeast Nigeria, millions of homes have been destroyed by conflict. So the burden of housing is unprecedented. The question then is, how do we respond? I think it is by solving the dual challenge of affordable and sustainable housing, building more, building faster and cheaper, and building greener and better. Let me start with affordability. Now, this is as much a matter of political will as it is a financial one. When I was in government, we debated whether mass housing made economic sense. It was an ideological debate. One minister argued, how can you have affordable housing when you don't have affordable cement? Yes, others argued that markets matter, but in poor countries, the state must play a decisive role. Social housing must be a deliberate choice, an investment with both social and economic returns. In Nigeria, history gives us some great examples. Governor Lateef Jakonde, governor of Lagos State, between 1979 and 1983, built over 30,000 affordable housing units. From the public budget alone, estates in Isolo, in Iponri, in Ipaja, Abeson, and more. And many of them stand today. More recently, Governor Zulu of Borno State, a state which is among the poorest in revenues, delivered over 12,000 units of housing between 2019 and 2023. In both cases, political will, efficient procurement, and smart implementation made it possible. Both leaders secured land in serviced areas, they negotiated building materials in bulk, and outsourced construction to local contractors. It worked. But government funding alone is simply not enough. We must leverage private capital. During the COVID-19 response, Nigeria's economic sustainability plan included a goal to build 300,000 affordable homes. A 200 billion fund was set up to be provided by the Central Bank of Nigeria, guaranteed by the Ministry of Finance. The Family Homes Fund, which was the vehicle for carrying out this project, itself had 100 billion naira. Developers partnered with SMEs and states provided land. The states provided in total about 750 hectares of land. The Family Homes Fund secured a 30% discount on cement from major producers, Dangote, Boa, and Lafarge. By 2022, 27,000 homes had been completed, but the central bank didn't deliver its share of funding. So, the Family Homes Fund was forced to rely on budget alone, and progress stalled. The truth, of course, is, as we've heard, that the Family Homes Fund, of course, has gone ahead and done even more in the past few years, especially in the last 2 years. For the long-term solution for building affordable housing and allowing men access to housing is mortgages. Mortgages, but not just for those in formal employment. Over 70% of Africa's labor force, especially the urban labor force, is in the informal sector. How do we build a mortgage system for them? In India, in the Philippines, and Indonesia, we've seen very innovative models that take into account the special circumstances of informal workers. The main components of those models that we've seen in these countries are group-based lending, cooperatives where members guarantee each other, subsidized interest rates from governments, alternative collateral like using the saving history of these workers, and then group endorsements, also flexible payments that match the seasonal incomes of informal workers have also been used. Today also digital tools are featuring prominently in mortgage models. With mobile money, digital IDs, and alternative credit scoring. We can adapt these models, and countries that are interested, especially in the global south, can very easily adapt these models because they take into account many of the common needs of developing countries. But in most of Africa, even mortgages for middle income are either unavailable or unaffordable. The average age for buying first homes in Europe is about between the ages of 35 and 36. So the average 35 and 36-year-old is probably in a position in Europe and the US to buy a home. Of course, there will be some variations here and there. I speak of myself. I graduated at the age of 21, and I didn't build my first home till I was 51 years old. That's 30 years after. And I worked every day of those 31 years. So even for the middle to higher income earners, we still have to de-risk mortgage lending so that those who are working hard, who even have jobs in the formal sector, can actually get a mortgage to build their homes. In most cases, you find that certain sectors, of course, have mortgages. Banks, for example, some of the telecoms companies, etc. But for the vast majority of those who are engaged in actual work, mortgages are simply too expensive or not available at all. There are two other problems that affect mass building in developing countries. The first, of course, is access to land, especially tightly. And there's another problem which we discovered in Lagos State in 1999, which I'll come back to in a moment. This would usually result in delays in the commencement of projects and, of course, investor reluctance. As for tightly, any kind of serious mass housing project is doomed if it fails in the area of title to land. Where title to land is uncertain, it's almost impossible to do any kind of serious mass housing. The other problem is also that without good, reliable titles, the potential capital that can be released from the asset itself is dormant. And of course, that worsens the problems of poverty. Some countries in Africa have tried to deal with this issue of title. For example, in Nigeria, our AGIS in Abuja, our land registry in Lagos, have made very innovative attempts to deal with questions of land titling on a large scale. Rwanda has developed a land titling model which is considered one of the better ones in the world. The Land Tenure Regularization Program, LTRP, Land Tenure Regularization Program of Rwanda, is widely regarded as effective and transformative. The objective of that program was to register all parcels of land in the country, and in just 4 years, 11 million parcels of land were demarcated and adjudicated. Local communities were central to the process of titling. Neighbors verified boundaries, helping to reduce disputes. Land committees and local adjudicators were trained, ensuring inclusivity and grassroots participation. And for identification and mapping, they used basic GPS mapping combined with satellite imagery and digital databases. Titles were linked to a digital land registry that's now integrated with Rwanda's e-government services, which has also helped to streamline land transfers, also inheritance and mortgages. The program also secured a very significant win for women's land rights, because land titles were issued in both husband and wife's names. More than 90% of land parcels are now formally registered with ownership legally protected. under the law. The outcomes, of course, were significant. First, improved security of tenure. A study by the DFID found that land conflicts and disputes dropped by over 80% in areas with registered titles. So there was increased investments. Farmers were more willing to invest in land improvements. They were more willing to invest in terracing, in irrigation. And there is, of course, greater access to finance because land titles enabled property owners to access credit more easily. So all of these, of course, supported the growth of small businesses and home ownership. Today, generally speaking, there are even more digital tools to make titling a lot easier. PropTech startups like Sezo Global use blockchain to digitize land records today, cutting fraud and opening property access for first-time buyers. The other problem, and this is the problem which I mentioned, we identified in Lagos State in the years 1999 to 2007. And this is the resolution of property disputes. And that's a problem that we had to deal with in the state. I served in the state, I had the honor of serving at that time as Attorney General. In 2000, the year 2000, the governor of Lagos State, His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who, as you know, of course, is now President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, referred a memo to me about a survey that was done that showed that the stock of low to middle income housing in Lagos was not growing. And the survey showed that people were preferring to invest in stocks and shares to building houses for rent. Why? The study found that many landlords felt that the magistrate court system that we had was so slow in resolving landlord and tenant disputes that once a tenant had paid his rent in advance, usually a year or two in advance, after the expiration of the term, he simply would not pay any more rent. And if he was taken to court, the court process could go on for years, during which the tenant lived rent-free in the house. And of course, claiming means profit was always so difficult. So building low to middle income housing was no longer as attractive as an investment. So we decided to take a look at the landlord and tenant cases in the magistrate courts. And we found that indeed, they went on for far too long. You could be in courts. Landlord and tenant cases could take literally years to resolve. So one of the short-term measures we took was the creation of mediation centers as part of our Citizens' Rights Department. The objective was to make mediation services accessible to all, especially for small claims. The mediation centers had trained mediators, mostly lawyers, from the Ministry of Justice, and at the end of a successful mediation, a binding and enforceable agreement was signed by all the parties. Our mediation centers achieved considerable success. In 1 year, we were able to resolve over 8,000 landlord and tenant cases, where the magistrate courts were barely able to complete 2,000 cases. And since then, mediation centers in Lagos State have been resolving over 20,000 cases yearly, most of which are landlord and tenant cases. And there are now, I believe, about 18 or so mediation centers in the state. And each of those mediation centers houses a number of mediators. The services are free. So, the building of homes on a large scale is easier if it involves a whole of government approach, from land registries to development control approvals to courts and quasi-judicial processes such as mediation centers, a whole of government approach. So let's turn very briefly to sustainability and technology. Climate change is perhaps the world's greatest existential challenge today. And for Africa, it is much worse. Our continent is warming faster than any other region of the world. And we are the worst hit and by far the least prepared for the devastations of climate change. Yet, we are the least responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. So Africa is actually bearing the brunt of carbon emissions, both legacy and current, of the global north. We are paying the highest price for the carbon-intensive development of the industrialized world. Yet ironically, if the world hopes to reach its net zero objectives, Africa must develop differently. We must pioneer the first green industrial civilization. Why? If Africa were to develop along the same carbon-intensive trajectory that the global north has gone, in order to reach middle to high income status, we will be pumping about 9.4 gigatons of CO2e into the atmosphere all the way up to 2050. And by 2050, we will then be responsible for 75% of global emissions. We will be the world's leading in global emissions. In that scenario, the world will not achieve net zero by 2050 or any time soon thereafter. So greening manufacturing, that is, making our manufacturing green, greening energy, greening transportation and construction are crucial. Traditional construction, as you know, is carbon heavy. If we meet our own housing needs using current methods, that is the methods used by the developed countries, and we develop along the same carbon-intensive pathway, then we will jeopardize global climate objectives. So how Africa develops, and a big part of that is how we build, has implications for the future of the world. We can either be the solution to the climate crisis or the nemesis of our world. And it's important for the world and for Africa to bear this in mind. So part of our responsibility, if we are to play our part in fighting the climate crisis, is the broad concept of climate positive growth as a development paradigm. And we can do so to our economic advantage. In Africa, we are climate competitive. We have comparative advantage in green industrialization. Over 60% of renewable energy sources are here. So we can build sustainably and we can do so cheaper than elsewhere. How then can we build sustainably? Sustainable housing, of course, as I'm sure all of us are aware, includes climate responsive designs. And there's so many different iterations of that. Using local materials to reduce reliance, for example, on air conditioning, using materials that are low carbon and locally available, such as ground earth, bamboo, and recycled plastics. We must also apply water and energy solutions, rainwater harvesting, compost toilets, and the use of solar power, especially solar mini-grids. And there are best practice examples here and there, especially in Africa. In Kenya, the Macau project, for example, uses interlocking soil blocks and rent-to-own models to deliver eco-friendly and affordable homes. Technology is also changing the game. In Malawi, 14 Trees, the company 14 Trees, built Africa's first 3D printed house, fast, cheap, and green. Off-grid solar communities, for example, like M-Copa, offer clean energy to entire neighborhoods. And technology isn't just about speed, it's also about inclusion. It's about connecting people to land, to loans, and to livelihoods. And I think that there are incredible examples, especially here in Africa, of the developments that are being made in sustainable building and sustainable housing. But let me conclude then by saying that housing is not a luxury. Neither is it just an asset class. It is a right, a platform for dignity, for stability, and for opportunity. We must see both the opportunity and the responsibility in providing homes for all. And I believe that the future of real estate must be sustainable to protect the planet. It must be technologically contemporary to scale solutions. It must be inclusive and diverse to reflect the lived realities of the diverse persons who will live in them. So the real estate practitioner is more than a builder of homes or places for commerce. You are a visionary architect of society itself, and you're called to lay the foundations for equity, to raise the walls that shelter dignity, and to shape communities that are resilient, that are inclusive, and alive with opportunity. Your work doesn't just create spaces, it actually creates futures. Thank you very much.